Hi, everyone. Today we're starting off the Talk to the Experts web series, and I am your host, Caroline. Today I've got Linda Clement of Raising Parents with us. Just before we go on, if you're joining us live, I would like for you to mute your audio and video on your end. Make sure you can hear us through your speaker. Just make sure you're not able to talk back so as not to interrupt Linda when she's talking. But I'd love to, of course, answer all your questions. That's why we are here today, to answer every question that you might have. So send your questions in the chat box and feel free to do that at any time throughout the session. I will be checking the chat box to make sure that all your questions are answered. Today, we have a number of questions that had been sent prior to starting this chat series. So we'll start with answering those questions first, and then we would go on to start answering all the questions that are in the chat box. All right. I am going to, so you can see my face. Hi, this is Caroline, and I'm going to introduce Linda Clement today. I'll be starting off with reading Linda's bio so that you get to know who she is and why she's the one you want to be listening to about parenting and all that fun stuff. I mean, I know that for me, since this is the third week of staying at home, so it's been a journey as a mom, working at home and been with my daughter full time and working full time as well, sort of. She's usually in daycare preschool all day from like 9 to 5. So that gives me a lot of time to work. And it's just interesting, I'm sure, from her perspective to see me working and being at home. Usually when she's at home, I'm not working. When she's out of home, she's having fun with friends. So interesting dynamics for sure, and I have a lot to learn today from Linda. So Linda is a parenting coach, and she's also an author. She's a longtime Lalich League leader and a former softball and umpire, an occasional doodler. She offers quirky, insightful view of children and child rearing, from a philosophy of respect for kids to lifelong learning in fields from child development and neurobiology to meditation and nutrition. Linda helps parents see through cultural clutter for what kids and parents and families and communities really need. Linda is a mother of 2 grown daughters, and her first book, The Way and Power of Mothering, Meditations on Mothering, Balance, and Taoist Way. Well, I'm going to be asking you, Linda, about what the Taoist Way is. As a new mom, present for her sister lays upon the birth of her niece, Gabrielle Grace. The original publication was hand-drawn and is now available from Amazon as an ebook and paperback. Her second book, Lazy Parenting, Parent in a Simpler Way, of course, I think I'm more interested in that one, is also available as an ebook or paperback and will soon be followed by a third book, Lazier Parenting. Awesome. Still more simpler parenting. And we're going to be sharing Linda's blog, which is a minefield. I was going over that, and it goes back as far as 2011 or 2001, I think.
I think it's 2001.
2001, yeah, I think so. So I'm going to be sharing all of that. I'm going to be sharing where to listen to Linda and all that stuff. So you want to wait because we're going to be sharing all of that information at the end of today's web series. All right, so welcome with me, Linda Clement today. Linda, how are you?
I am great. I don't have any children living with me, so my isolation has been much simpler.
Awesome. I kind of envy you, but I'm like, well, whatever, my time will come. So so no worries there. All right, we're just going to dive quickly into the questions that we already have. So I have about almost 10 questions here that people had kind of written earlier before this session. And then once there are questions in the chat box, we'll kind of get those on, and then we'll start answering all of them. But is there anything you want to kind of say before we get started with the questions, Linda?
I think more than anything, I think it's really important to remember that all parents love their children. Some parenting methods do not appear loving to children, but all parents love their children. So, I might make kind of snarky comments about some particular parenting techniques that I think make a big mess.
Yeah.
It's not about whether or not parents love their children. It's about whether or not that technique works.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Sometimes, like, when my husband and I discipline our daughter, I'm like, her, she probably thinks we hate her so much, but we're doing this because we love you. Okay, so here's the thing. Well, one of the things that I really want to know, and I'm sure this is going to be different for different ages as well. What do I do with kids all day? I've got work to do, and I'm sure most people are either working from home now or trying to figure out what to do with their businesses moving forward. What are we supposed to be doing with these kids? This is not something I'm used to. She's always out with it with her teachers, and they've all got it figured. I have deep respect for all teachers right now because I just can't figure it out. So I'll let you take it away, Linda.
And I think more than anything else, take the heat off. You don't need to make sure that they get educated, socialized, and are basically ready to have a job and move out of the house in 2 weeks. They can take this time off. Even high school students can take this time off and just be off and do whatever it is they're interested in doing. Opportunities like this are pretty rare in our culture for families to really spend a lot of time together and really get to know each other and what they like doing and what they prefer in the way of a sort of a daily schedule. When their energy is high, when it is they'd rather be quiet. Those kinds of things are really difficult to find out about yourself when you're constantly working on other people's schedules. So it's an opportunity to be a little more free without sort of trying to make up for the fact that you don't have 15 kids for them to play with or some huge curriculum for them to follow. It really is okay to just relax and let them play at whatever it is they're interested in playing. I like Mr. Rogers' comment. Play is the work of childhood. It isn't what they do after they finish working. It's very important for them to play because that's how humans naturally learn. In a play environment, kids will learn things, and even adults will learn things with 1 or 2 repetitions instead of in sort of a forced curriculum. You need to learn this many things, where repetitions can be as high as 40 before it's effective learning.
Wow. That's amazing. I love Mr. Rogers, by the way. And it's interesting to realize that it's okay to let them play. I mean, we tend to think they need to be doing something. I guess it's how we feel as adults, right? And that there's that productivity pressure on us. Like we have all this free time. We need to be doing something with it. And I guess we're probably passing it on to the kids. So it's quite refreshing and relieving to know that it's okay for my daughter to do nothing and just have fun.
The thing is, when she's having fun, she isn't doing nothing. She's just doing nothing that anybody else would maybe recognize as productive. What she's doing is integrating her understanding of her world. And as you said, she's getting to see you at work. So awesome. that's a thing she's never seen before. For her, the only people who work are, I guess, grocery store clerks or librarians or something, and the daycare workers.
Yeah.
They don't see people working in their regular lives very often anymore. And it's an interesting view into your world that she'll get to see.
Absolutely. Thank you, Linda. I totally agree with that. And of course I agree with that. Okay. So, well, for me, I do have the 1 kid, so I'm not really, I'm just going to jump to Leon's comment here. Leon says, I love your comment about relaxing and just letting them play. There's so much pressure on us parents to educate our kids at home right now. Totally agree with you, Leon. Yeah. So I was going to say that for me, I have the 1 kid. So I'm not totally worried about kids fighting because I don't really have that issue, right? But what happens when kids are always fighting? That's, I guess, with an issue that parents with 2 and more kids have. And I tend to remember when I was much younger. Of course, I was in the middle of 2 sisters, and we were fighting all the time. I don't know how we didn't drive my mom crazy, but like, how do you limit it? How do you end that fighting?
I love the idea that you didn't drive your mom crazy. I feel like she would feel differently about that. I think she has a different perspective on that. More than anything else, kids fighting is either just simply conflicting needs and they don't know how to negotiate it, or they're trying to get their parents' attention and they've figured out that works really well. So I like to make it really clear that attention is a need, not a demand. So kids need attention. So when they do what they need to do to get your attention, you know that they're not getting enough. And instead of
Oh.
saying, oh, they're only doing it for attention, so just ignore them, which makes it louder,
Mm-hmm.
the idea is to give them attention before they get to the point where they're starving for it and will take negative attention rather than positive or neutral attention.
Wow.
Mostly
Absolutely.
with kids fighting, the answer is almost always to stop dealing with the words and to start dealing with the feelings.
Mm.
So going in and saying, it sounds like you're feeling provoked by your sister and it's making you angry because you want her to play this way and she wants you to play this way and you guys just simply don't agree on this. Whereas if you go in and say, well, she said this and you said that and you had this first and she had that next, and trying to be the cop involved in
Mm-hmm.
deciding who gets the toy or something,
Yeah.
that just amplifies the problem and makes it last longer. If you go in and deal with the feelings rather than the sort of material of the argument, it can help them feel heard and give them the vocabulary that they need to be able to negotiate more effectively among each other as
Mm-hmm.
fast as they can learn how to do that. By
Mm.
saying, this is what I need and this is what you have or what I would like from you, rather than that constant, she's holding the Barbie wrong, he's got the wrong Lego piece, I wanted all the red ones. This stuff is just endless. And if you can sort of go underneath that surfacey stuff, it's more effective at limiting the amount of bickering and nonsense that goes on.
Lena, that's pretty insightful. As a follow-up question to that, I mean, for me, I think the experience I have with that, and that's kind of another question is, do you think that's the same thing with when they cry, especially as toddlers? Is it about attention? Like, for example, my daughter would just start crying on things that are pretty non-important, like they're totally unimportant things. I'm like, looks like there's something more to this than the crying. Is that the same thing?
Well, it can be. Sometimes it can just be that they are literally in need of attention, and that, like, that part of them is empty, so you need to fill it. Quite often, what adults forget, because we don't remember being two very often, is 2-year-olds have really tiny bodies and really big feelings. So they have adult-sized feelings in a very small body and absolutely no idea how to get rid of them or make them go away or stop them from happening or all those other things that we all want with feelings. So they get overloaded with them. And then, of course, they burst out of the sides and they have tantrums, or they just start crying about the color of the tissue paper.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens, you know.
The idea is that sort of throughout the day, life is frustrating when you're tiny to start with. They can't push the house out of the way, even though it's in their way. They can't make the people in their universe move the way they want them to, even though they can think it and make it happen. They can't remember the word that they meant, so they asked for oatmeal when they meant yogurt. And then when they don't know what to do because it's still not what they wanted, but they still don't remember the right word. So in general, they're just kind of simmering at a level of frustration that most adults don't live at, without even starting into the, you need to brush your teeth and get dressed and go and do this, and we have this schedule and hurry, 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 we need to go, kind of thing that toddlers just don't like at all.
No.
So sort of beyond that part of it, when a child is crying, they're communicating. And there's a transition period between when the only communication they have available to them, really, to say, I have an unmet need or I'm in pain or something, is crying. And then they transition to being able to talk about it when they are fed, watered, rested, have enough attention, have had a hug recently enough, sort of when they're full of what it is that they need. Then they can communicate at their highest level they have available. And everywhere in between, completely, completely depleted of what they need and completely full of what they need, their communication skills will be less or more mature, depending on how much they need, how much is outstanding that they need. So when they're crying, it's usually because they're tired or hungry or thirsty or need a hug or haven't had enough attention or have been hurried through too many things. They're just full of stress and empty of what it is they need. And then they cry because they're sort of younger and they don't have the communication skills anymore. I don't know if you've ever noticed how much younger a child looks when they're tired, how much less coordinated they are, how much
I am not.
is. I actually think adults do the same thing. They get a little bit
Oh.
coordinated. They can't communicate very well. They're more likely to misunderstand something and take it the wrong way. I think, the more full somebody is of what it is they need, the more mature they can be. So, toddlers are kind of immature to start with, and life is frustrating. So they cry a lot because it really is just that one last thing on top of a lot of other things that we kind of forget how difficult it is to be.
Wow, thank you, Linda. That's so good to know. So Leanne is asking here, I'm just going to jump to her question. What is the appropriate amount of screen time for a 4-year-old in isolation?
I have read all the recommendations about screen time, and because I'm not a very gullible person, I've also read the background information behind those. And the recommendations are just silly, really, because they're talking about what kind of bad things happen. Leave a stressed out 9-year-old alone in a room with a TV. If you don't have that life, how much TV a kid watches in any given day is just, it doesn't matter. They will naturally go find something else to do when they get bored. They will look around for other things. You can engage them in other activities easily. When you're looking at the kids who are constantly being pushed aside or just aren't allowed to engage because parents are doing important things like reading the newspaper or watching the news, or just, don't bother me, kid, get away from me kind of attitude. And they spend all day in school where they witness bullying if they don't actually experience it themselves, or they may be the bullies in school because kids who need a lot tend to figure out how to get power anyways. If they're not constantly stressed out so that when they come home, what they want more than anything else is a distraction from all that thing that's going on inside them, how much time they watch screens doesn't matter very much. If you're sitting next to them, watching them, you're talking with them about what's going on, you're fully aware of the kinds of things they are seeing. If they see anything disturbing, you can talk about it right away. You can talk about the issues that are involved in the kinds of programming that they're watching. Like some of the TV shows, especially American TV, is just filled with disrespect and an enormous amount of bullying that's just seen as normal. Whereas some of the other cultures, TV, like some of the stuff that comes from Brazil, some of the stuff that comes from Spain, Canada, the UK, tends to be gentler in general and more respectful. Be careful about what your kids are watching, but otherwise, if they think it's fun to watch somebody unwrap a piece of candy, it's really, kids will kind of naturally balance themselves as long as they're allowed to run around when they want to run around, as long as they're allowed to make noise when they want to make noise, then they don't have that sort of constant stress, making it so that distraction is frankly more attractive than everything else in the world.
Got it. That's so good to know as well. And talking about screen time, I know there's a lot of information about limiting that and scheduling as well and all that fun stuff. What kind of schedule is best to kind of have for kids? I mean, at this time, everyone's home. We are probably all doing one thing or the other. What kind of scheduling is best to maintain for kids that kind of keeps everyone sane?
I think it's a really good idea to get as much fresh air as possible. In parts of the world where weather is really horrible, they have sort of quips. There's no such thing as bad weather. There's only bad clothing. In Northern Europe, it's considered an article of faith that all children must sleep outside for a minimum of 2 hours every single day, no matter what the weather is.
Oh, wow.
We have this sort of sense that unless the weather's, we don't go outside, but rain is different than wind, and wind is different than sun, and all of them are worth exploring, and all of them involve fresh air and natural scenes. If you can go for a walk every day somewhere natural, there currently aren't very many restrictions on that, as long as you're in places that are not overcrowded. Stay away from the playgrounds, but otherwise, spend time outside every day, for sure, every day. And the younger the kids, the more they need it. They bounce off the walls in a way that is very stressful for them. The echoes, the stuff that's all over the place, whether it's your stuff or the art on the walls or whatever, just the angular corners and stuff is not super great for human brains. We need to be outside more. And being outside in natural light will make a big difference to everybody's mental health.
I think it helps adults too, and not just the kids, right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and everybody needs vitamin D, and we don't make it inside. So
That's right.
Go out. The other thing, quite often after a long day at home, when everybody's trying to get work done as well as trying to keep the children from killing each other or themselves, going outside after dark can be really, really settling for kids. Looking up at the sky, looking up at the trees, looking up at the street lights. Just being outside after dark can really sort of make up for the artificial light that we're spending all of our time. And it can be really settling. Finish up dinner, finish up the dishes, get ready for bed as much as you need to, and then head outside for a while.
Got it. Amazing. Thank you, Linda. I'm going to say thank you like 1,000 times because these are things that I need to hear. And I'm like, okay, awesome. Taking notes myself. I got to go rewatch all this. And that's the good thing about this. This has been recorded and it's going to be available for replay. So you can sit down anytime and replay it over and over again. Like if you missed something that Linda said, you can always go back to watch it. So now let's see. Oh yeah, this happens all the time. When you ask kids to do something like do a household chore or something like that, you have like all these things set out for them to do. They just don't want to do it, right? There is never a problem with teachers though. Like they always have the magic, that just makes them do it. But when as parents we set up stuff for the kids and they don't do it, what are we doing wrong?
Okay. This is a really deep conversation and it has a bunch of different facets to it. I'll start with the fact that teachers get kids to do things parents can't get their kids to do.
Okay.
Especially in school, but not limited to it. Adults have, especially very effective teachers, and some of them are aware of it, adults have a power tool parents don't have. When kids don't know for sure that they're safe, they tend to be more compliant. So there they are in the classroom with the teacher who says, if you don't, it'll go on your permanent record or you'll get sent to the principal's office. You don't know what that means. It just sounds scary and dangerous. And so they comply regardless of how they feel about it. Now that compliance comes at a cost. They get very stressed out and tend to come home and beat up their sister or pick on the dog or just generally go wild. But that's one of the reasons why other people can get your kids to do stuff you can't get them to do. And that actually is the kind of thing that I like to point out is actually a compliment to you. It means your kids trust you. And they will tell you the truth about how they feel about doing whatever it is that you decided they should do. When it comes to housework, I'm a real antisocial human being on this subject. I don't believe children were born having signed a contract that they're supposed to be doing the drudgery so the adults don't have to. And there aren't very many children who, if you ask them, would say, oh yeah, I'm totally beneath my parents. I should do all the work that's beneath them. So part of the problem is the attitude that adults have towards the work in the first place. They don't value it very much. They think somebody else should be doing it. And they look around and somebody else's are short. So they try to get those somebody else's to do it. In general, the more you approach your work and the product of your work with a sense of appreciation and value, the more likely they are to want to join in the first place. So this is about gaining cooperation rather than forcing compliance. Because you can, with a concerted effort and endless concerted effort, get your kids to comply. What you can't do is fix their attitude, which is, I don't want to do it either. Because that's the attitude that they see demonstrated in front of them all the time. Whereas if you say, I'm going to do this and I'm really looking forward to it being all clean and shiny and I'm really energized by it, first of all, you aren't going to be looking around for somebody else to hand the job off to. And second, it looks more attractive. So often I say we need to work on our own attitude about that kind of task before we go around handing it off to anybody else.
It just paints a picture in my mind now. Sometimes I'm using this before and I'm just cleaning it off and my daughter wants to grab it and she wants to do it too. Or then she sees it hanging somewhere when no one's using it and she just wants to go ahead and use it. Do you think that's part of why? Because she sees mom doing it, it's interesting for her to do it as well because it's something that mom does, right?
Well, and when you look at what a child's task is, sort of overall, their internal drive is to master themselves in the world they find themselves in. They want to become adults, and they don't become adults by learning how to be better children. They become adults by having adult tools, doing adult tasks, and being involved in adult work.
Awesome. Well,
my mom used to do the housework on Mondays while we were at school, and we'd come home and the housekeeping fairy had cleaned everything up. I was very upset when I found out the housekeeping fairy wasn't moving out with me.
You should have brought her with you. Maybe not.
I know, right?
Of my house.
Yeah, you can come and clean mine now.
Let's talk a little bit about developing a curriculum for kids' education at this time. I know that playing is essential, like you've mentioned, to their mental health and everything right now, and it's okay to just let them be. But if we want them to get some education along the way, what kind of curriculum should we be maintaining for them, while we're at home?
I would say anything that they find interesting, they should do more of. So if they think it's fun to go through those workbooks of math or word problems or whatever it is that they're interested in, then absolutely, yeah, go for it. Have fun with it. There are fantastic resources online. YouTube has videos on every possible subject. Lots of kids find it easier to remember things with music, and there's lots of them available. I learned how to spell dictionary when I was 4 because of some demented Disney cartoon. Never used it very often, but I know how. I actually kind of still remember the song as well. So I think looking for broader resources than sort of sitting down, listening to a lecture and doing problems, because that's not a very effective way of learning things anyways. It would help if you decided what it was that you thought they needed to learn and why they need to learn that. Like if you think, well, they'd be in grade 4 doing fractions now anyways, so they should do fractions. Instead of sitting them down at a table and trying to explain fractions to somebody, I can't even imagine doing, because wow, that's going to be painful.
Yeah.
Cooking is a great way to learn math because it's all about proportions and relationships. All of the measuring equipment involves that. Playing around with a tape measure in the house is a great way to find out how fractions work and how big things are and how proportional they are to other things. There's a lot of different ways of exploring the subject when you're only dealing with 1 or 2 kids or 5 instead of 25 at really widely very different stages and ages. Like I think mostly take a look around your house and find out how you can use what's in your house as a way of exploring the subject, rather than we're going to do lesson 1 and then we're going to do lesson 2 and then nobody wants to do that, or very few people want to do that. Mostly that's really a very painful way to learn, and it's not a very effective way to learn. You get to the end, you write it on the test, you forget all of it because you'll never use it again.
That's right. That's good to know. Just a reminder, if you're joining us in the live audience, please mute your audio and switch off your video so that we can continue to see Linda. If you want to add any questions, please feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and I will be reading that out to Linda to answer for us today. All right, so let's move on. So here's the thing, we're juggling parenting and working from home and all these things, and we're juggling being anxious about what's out there now, and sometimes we do get burnt out, right? We do get burnt out, and it's just so hard to think about self-care or whatever things we even usually do for self-care, which some of them may involve going outside, and we can't get that done right now. So how can we take a break, or what should we be doing? How can we get off, all this mess a little bit and then just calm down again?
Yeah. Years and years ago, I wrote an article called "Parents Don't Need Me Time," also known as "Can I go to Club Med, please?" The idea that the restful way to get a break and to get self-care is to have an afternoon to 2 weeks off every week or year isn't really how people work. It's not helpful, actually, because you get home from the holiday or the afternoon and it takes, 5 nanoseconds to actually be right back to as stressed as you were before. So my suggestion is always to start early and do it often. Do something very early in the day that's restful and rejuvenating to start. And then, on a bad day, 10 minutes later, on a not so hard day, an hour later, do something else that's just, anywhere from 10 seconds to 3 minutes of resting and rejuvenating on purpose, so that you are constantly refilling your energy levels so that you get to the end of the day with anything left, rather than getting to the end of the day being super impatient for the kids to go to bed right now, when they may not be as tired as you. Because you're looking for that, I've been doing this all day and now I get my time at the end of the day. Whereas if you'd taken it all through the day in tiny little pieces, you would never be that tired by the end.
But now here's the thing, where I know you're saying take chunks of time off, right? And then do a little self-care, whatever that might look like for yourself. But in trying to manage all of that, it's time for self-care, time for the kids, time for me, time for my work. How do we actually get things done, especially when you have very active kids? And unfortunately, in Metro Vancouver, many people live in condos. So think about small spaces as well. How do we really get things done with people with kids with very short attention span and very needy kids at times? Yeah.
I think one of the things, there's a productivity tool called Pomodoro, which I really love in general, because it has been very well demonstrated that when you have a burst of work for 20 minutes and then a 5-minute break, and you repeat that pattern throughout the day, you will get so much more done than if you try to work for 3 or 4 hours straight and then take a break, because our energy level depletes really quickly, especially when you're doing mental work. So I suggest to parents, if they have kids at home now, and if it's at all possible for them, if they're working from home, to start their day really early, and to plan to end it really late, and to do it in short bursts of work with breaks regularly. Now, the Pomodoro Technique is 20 minutes and 5 minutes. And that's probably too long for a 2-year-old. So probably more like 10 minutes and 5 minutes, and 10 minutes and 5 minutes, and 10 minutes and 5 minutes will make a big difference. And then of course there'll be the period of time where they're off doing something all by themselves magically for a period of time. And then you can use that big block of time when they're naturally interested in something else to really get into whatever it is you need a longer concentration period for. And when you're home with kids, you actually start being able to see those patterns pretty quickly. You can see that they're first thing in the morning, you could probably work for 90 minutes and they'd be completely fine. Whereas last thing before dinner, you'd be lucky if you can work for 2 minutes without them losing their minds. So seeing which part of the day they have more energy to be on their own and which part of the day they have less energy and need more support or more contact makes a huge, huge difference to how much you can do in a day with kids around.
Awesome. That's very good to know. I think we've this next question, I'm looking at it, I think we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but if there's anything more you want to say about it, that would be awesome. The question says, I'm just going to go here. It says, their attitude is driving me wild. How can I get kids to do anything they need to do in a day?
Yeah, anything they need to do. The thing is, kids are inclined to do what they need to do. They need to sleep unless somebody's making them go to bed before they're tired. They need to eat unless somebody's trying to talk them into eating when they're not hungry. They need rest. They need exercise. And those things are hard to do in that, Vancouver condo that doesn't have room for it. And for that reason, I say again, go outside, really go outside. Don't go to a park, don't go to a space where there's going to be a lot of people, but go to a playground, a forest, a field, a stream, an ocean shoreline. Go somewhere outside, because kids really need to get out into the air and into the light. And so do we.
That's right.
We often don't, but we actually do need it. And when we take care of those needs in advance, kids tend to be much more cooperative for all the rest of the things that need to be done. And again, your own attitude towards the work will make a tremendous difference to how cooperative anybody is around it. And when you're enjoying the work and you believe that it is valuable and you value the product of the work, you will do it with a sense of enjoyment that means it doesn't matter if anybody else joins in. They need to brush their teeth pretty regularly. They need to bathe from time to time. But really also look at whether or not anybody needs to do what it is that somebody's suggesting they do. Do they need to get out of their pajamas when they're going to spend all day at home?
Do we get out of our pajamas when we spend all day at home?
I don't get out of my pajamas when I spend all day at home. There's a couple of conventions that people think, well, you need to do this every day. And well, you don't need to make your bed. It doesn't actually make the bed better. It's kind of but it's their bed in their bedroom. If it bugs you, shut the door. Leave them a little more autonomy and give them some space to cooperate rather than, sort of pushing. There's a fun exercise in Tai Chi. It's called pushing hands, where you push somebody's hand and they push you back. And the trick is to learn how to move when they push you instead of doing that pushing back thing. That is actually really difficult to learn because our natural instinct is to push back when we're pushed. So anytime you feel your kids are resisting something, you're pushing and they're just pushing back. Totally natural.
But some of these things, Linda, I think one of the issues here is we've been conditioned to think that we're trying to discipline and shape the kids, getting them to get up in the morning, lay their beds, getting them to brush their teeth, and we're almost kind of like we're conditioning them for certain behaviors that are expected of humans. So how do you balance what you said about letting them lead with what they're doing and questioning the conventions? How do you balance that with actually disciplining, putting them in a schedule, and just making sure that they're ready for life? You know what I mean?
I'll tell you something I know about schedules, because this is funny. You'd think this one would have stuck. There's a story that if you do something for 3 weeks every day, then it'll be a habit. I went to the gym for 6 months, 3 times a week for 6 months, and then stopped. And I smoked for 7 years, and then I quit. And when I grew up as a kid, I had dessert every day for lunch and dinner, cookies and fruit for lunch and some kind of dessert for dinner every day of my life until I moved out. And I never think of making dessert, and I never have. We are not conditioning our kids for their future. They're living their lives right now.
That's very profound. I could never have thought about that. Linda, just to check, it looks like you just went frozen there. Are you still there, Linda?
Probably is. I am still here, but my internet connection tells me I'm unstable.
Oh, okay. Well, that's okay. Was there anything we missed? The last thing I probably heard was we're not conditioning them for life. They're already living their life now. We're not conditioning them for the future. They're living their life now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And the idea is that we're conditioning them for life is based on a very old theory of brain development, which is basically that they're finished and then we just fill up the bucket until they're adults. And that's not how it works. There are major brain components that children don't have at all. And until they have them, they can't use them. And the things that they use those for, once they have the brain parts, they can do. So doing it every day since you're 2 isn't actually going to have any impact, because as soon as they get that brain part, they'll have to relearn it anyways.
Wow, got it. I'm just going to jump to Leanne's question here. And by the way, if you're part of the live audience, please put your questions in the chat box. We're having issues live streaming to Facebook, but this is going to be recorded and it's going to be posted on Facebook later on. So Facebook participants are really able to ask us live questions, which is a good thing for people that have registered and are able to join us live. So put your questions in the chat box. Leanne says, what is the best way to hold kids accountable for their actions?
I'm every now and then I think I'm the nastiest person in the world. I'm the kind of person who is very good at focusing on what the real issue is. So say an example was my younger daughter kicked out one of my older daughter's teeth. It was loose already, it was more or less an accident. But of course the scrap that followed was, older daughter has a complete fit at her and, tries to get her back, which is, never going to work very well. And actually injured her sister more than she had been injured. And what I always recommend doing is treating the injury first. So whether it's a broken lamp or a bruised arm or, whatever has happened, deal with that first, right in front of the person who did it. Because then they get an unobstructed view of what happens when you do these things. What happens when you're not paying attention? What happens when you lash out in anger? And because that, cleaning up the lamp, taking care of the injury or whatever, takes some time, you get an opportunity to calm down your inner mama bear who's going to ruin somebody for hurting your baby. And you also get to show the person who did it what has happened. So by the time you turn to them and say, can you tell me what happened? They already feel horrible about themselves because they've done all this stuff and they can see it, instead of them immediately having to protect from the wrath of mom, which is our natural reaction, right? We always, how could you do that? Don't be horrible to your sister. And that just makes them feel defensive and misunderstood. Like anything that immediately turns on them because of the result of their behavior, kids are not malicious is, I think, a really important baseline.
That's a very good point, Linda.
They don't understand very clearly that other body over there has a person in it. And that person has eyes that see a different direction from themselves. That's the kind of conceptual thinking that kids don't get to until they're 12 or 13. So when they're still in that, I'm a 4-year-old and I bashed my sister over the head with a truck, they don't understand that can actually do serious damage because they don't have the ability to understand that. They don't know what is going to happen when they do things. So they're never malicious. So they were always trying to do something else. And they might have been trying to say, get away from me. I don't want you anywhere near me when they bashed them over the head with the truck. But they aren't saying, I'm trying to injure you. So when they see the result of that behavior and, the Band-Aids, the kissing, the crying, oh, that was really scary. That was really shocking for you. When they see that without having to defend themselves from being misunderstood, being accused of being mean or meaning to do it, doing things on purpose, they don't have to defend themselves from learning what happened when they did that. When they immediately feel attacked or censured for what they did wrong, they come up with all the reasons why that wasn't what they meant. It wasn't what they were doing. That, like, they can't hear it. So you need to give enough space for them to see what happens so that they can understand and hear why not to do that again. And they'll come up with their own reasons. They don't like feeling that way. By the time you're halfway through taking care of your sister's head injury, they're often crying in sympathy and apologetic all by themselves. You don't need to push that.
Right.
And I think accountability is something kids develop naturally rather than have to have installed in them.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I'm just going to jump to Erica's question. And I think she was asking a follow-up question to what we're talking about when we were talking about whether disciplining kids and drumming things into their head so that they know it when they're all grown. And she says, on that topic, would you say we are setting the base for good or bad things now, and then they retweak those things as their brains develop?
I think we're setting the foundations very early, right from birth. In fact, probably before birth, based on the kind of stress hormones that are involved. We're helping people at very young ages feel good in their bodies most of the time, or feel stressed in their bodies most of the time. And when people feel good most of the time and are relaxed and happy and have what they need, they mostly do creative and interesting, engaging things and care about people a lot. And when they're stressed out or needing to be hypervigilant for the next attack or the next scary parent noise or whatever, they have a much more difficult time feeling settled and good inside themselves, and that comes out in their behavior later.
Thank you. One final question before we head on to other things here. And just so you know, participants in the live audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop in the chat box. But we have one more question from Steve. Steve says, how do I help keep my kids and wife from losing their minds right now? It seems there are different skill sets for coping, and ours are very different. So maybe it's how to understand, how do I understand them and their needs versus my own blueprint?
Okay, I think to start with, I like to remind people, or possibly tell them for the first time, we only have 5 needs. We have infinite wants and desires, but we have 5 actual needs. Apart from the main one, obviously, is the one that is critical and requires for life. We need the physical things that we need to live. Food, rest, water, exercise, natural light, and the care and concern of other people. The first thing we need is a sense of security, and that comes from having enough food and having enough water and being safe enough to sleep and those kind of things. So the first one is a sense of security. The second one is feeling loved and a sense of belonging. The third one is personal power, the sense of autonomy and that you are allowed to make decisions for your own preferences. A sense of freedom, which obviously feeds directly off of the sense of personal power, and the opportunity for fun. So when you look at any given negotiation over how things are going to go in the next little while, it's easier if you think, which needs am I trying to meet here, or which needs seem to be unmet here? In this particular environment right now, a lot of people have had their sense of security shaken to the core. This has been really, really frightening for people. It's why they're hoarding toilet paper. Because sometimes when you're really afraid, you do what you can think of, and it doesn't necessarily make sense. But the trick is to go back to helping people feel safer. It's acknowledging the reality of the fear and reattuning them to the environment they're actually in. You know, inside your house, where nobody's coughing on you right now, you're very unlikely to encounter this if you haven't already gotten it. And there's not much you can do about it if you have, either way. So it generally, in terms of your immune system, would be better if you calm down. And there are a couple of really strong physiological things you can do to calm people down when they're frightened. One of my favorite ones, which is just the silliest thing in the world, is with your left thumb. I don't know why, but it matters. You blow really hard, like you're blowing up a balloon. An entire deep breath or 2, and for reasons that I don't know anything about, it lowers your heart rate. So if you're really feeling frantic and keyed up and you don't know what to do and your energy's all over the place, that can calm your body down enough so that you can actually see that you're safe in your house and there aren't any bears, and you probably don't need to be on the alert for an attack by pirates right now. There are 2 other techniques that can work the same way. You can do if you have a bathtub, or if you have a pool in your facility that you're still allowed to use. Being fully submerged in water will also reduce your heart rate. Oh, and one other one, being up high, like standing on a balcony and looking out, also will lower your heart rate. Don't know why. The other one that works everywhere and takes a little bit longer is called 5-4-3-2-1, and it's a technique that's used to lower anxiety in people who have a hard time dealing with panic attacks. You look for 5 things that you can see, because the first thing you should do is look around your environment and see if you're having a panic attack for a reason. There might be a pirate behind you. You know, take a look around for 5 things you can see, and then 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can physically touch, 2 things you can smell, and what the inside of your mouth tastes like. And by the time you get to the end of those things, your body will have calmed down because you're looking around your environment and in yourself to see if there's anything you actually need. And most of the time there isn't.
Wow.
So calming down those body fears can make a big difference to everybody's lives. If you practice them regularly, it'll just make a big difference to the amount of arguments you'll have in your house and the kinds of ridiculous misunderstandings that you realize later you had a fight over something you don't even know what it was. That's almost always that inner fear coming out in, I don't know what to do with this energy, so I'll bark at somebody else.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is really amazing tips, and I see comments in the chat box, and those are awesome. Yeah, Kiara, the first one is blowing on your thumb, right, and taking a deep breath, right? That was the first tip. Is that right, Linda? Mm-hmm.
Yep. And your left thumb, the pad of your left thumb. It's related to your vagus nerve somehow, and it lowers your blood pressure and your heart rate right away.
Awesome. Wow, awesome. Okay, that's the end of questions, Linda. What an amazing time we've had, and thank you so much for coming on this. Just to let you know, if you registered for the Talk to the Expert web series, it's going to be a live series for the next week or two, just bringing in experts from different industries to help us navigate our new realities as we are dealing with social distancing, physical distancing at this time. Today, we've been talking to Linda Clement of Raising Parents, and she's shared very amazing, awesome tips with us. This is going to be available for a replay on YouTube and Facebook. So if you registered, you're going to get the replay link, and you can just feel free to share with your friends and family members who didn't register for this, because I think every parent really needs to hear some of these tips, and it would really, really, really help us. Before we go, Linda, do you have anything in addition to share? I'm going to be sharing some of the resources you've shared with me to share with our participants, but before then, do you have anything you just want to share with us?
The only other thing was, you had mentioned right at the beginning the title of my first book, The Way and the Power of Mothering, Meditations on Balanced Mothering in the Taoist Way. And you asked what the Taoist Way was.
That's right. Thank you. I totally forgot that myself.
and I need to be able to close that loop because I'm a little bit like Sheldon. The Taoist Way is basically the Tao Te Ching, written by Lao Tzu in long time ago China. He was a government official and then an advisor to one of the, I don't remember what the dynasty people were called, emperors, I think. And his basic perspective was that the best leadership always comes from below and behind, and people are naturally good if you allow them to be. So it was a translation of the 81 chapters of the Tao Te Ching from a parenting perspective.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks for that. Okay, so I'm just going to head on to sharing Linda's resources. Linda's blog, I think, like I said earlier, I think it's a minefield. You just want to head on there, and she has like amazing series on there that you want to go. There's a 7-part series on, what's that again, Linda?
On chores. On
getting kids to do chores. There's a 7-part series on that. These are also this is our ideas for keeping us from going bonkers during a trying day, week, month, however long this is going to be. If you registered for this live series, you will get this in an email, so it's easier for you to access. Linda also shared with us some other resources on online learning, including stuff like NASA, travel and leisure, and all that fun things. And there's an online free self-quarantine skills, 50 skills to learn online. That's awesome.
There's some really neat articles and collections of things you can go look at online.
Awesome. So Linda is going to be, do you want to talk a little bit about the Yahel Demeter? I don't know if I got that right. And the podcast with Heart Space Interiors, Linda.
I think Yahel Demeter is his name. I think that's how it's pronounced. He's a really fascinating business strategist from Israel who's doing a Biz Like It Is podcast and asked for people to come in and go through his process. That is actually looking like it's going to be a really interesting interview. That'll be coming up. I think it'll be live in April.
Okay.
And Heart Space Interiors, I had a conversation with Shona Fraser from Heart Space Interiors for her podcast a couple of months ago, I think, and it'll also be out somewhere in late April. But both of them are really interesting podcasts in general. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And like I said earlier at the beginning, Linda is an author of 2 books. The first one is Way Power Mothering Meditations, an ebook, right? And it's available on Amazon. The second book is Lazy Parenting, finding simpler ways to parent. And she has an upcoming book, Lazier Parenting. So we're totally looking forward to that. So those are the 2 links to Linda's books. Feel free to go to Amazon to support Linda by buying her book. So thank you so much for coming today, Linda. I really appreciate you taking time to do this. In this series of Talk to the Expert, our next speaker is going to be Nike Famojiro, and she's going to be speaking on April 1st at 10 a.m. She's a coach. Her business is Mom Leader. She's going to be talking about productivity tips for moms at this time. So you would definitely want to check that out and listen for that, and be here to participate and to ask any questions. All right, I'm going to just let's see if anyone here is saying anything. On the live audience, they say thank you for all the information. I'm going to try this on all 3 kids, adults and teen. Awesome, Kiara. Leanne, yes, you're going to be getting these links emailed to your box since you registered for the live participation. So you get all these links emailed to your box. Any parting words from you, Linda?
I think really remembering that this is not training for your kids' lives. This is your kids' lives. This is their real life right now. And one of my favorite quotes, and I really wish I could run down who it was that said it, a 3-year-old is not half a 6-year-old, and a 6-year-old is not half a 12-year-old. They are full people, and they don't need to be halfway to anywhere. They've got major brain development coming that will make them capable of doing all of the things they need to be able to do as an adult when they get the brain parts.
Awesome. Thank you, Linda. That's such profound words to leave us with. All right. Thank you, Linda. And I will see you around.
Thank you, Caroline.
Have a good day, everyone.